What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong? Harold sat behind the wheel, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, the slow crawl of traffic stretching endlessly ahead like a prison sentence. It was a blistering August afternoon in suburban Ohio, and the heat inside his aging car seemed to press down on him with the weight of years, heavy, suffocating. 68 years had passed, but this felt like a trap that time had set for him. He glanced at the clock, 2 hours stuck in a traffic jam caused by some construction miles ahead. The world outside his windows blurred into a haze of red brake lights and impatient horns. This wasn't just a traffic jam. It was a metaphor for his life. Everything slowed down, everything stalled, everything seemed to be fading away. His body ached, joints stiff and betraying him. His mind felt clouded, weighed down by the regrets he'd carried for decades. The dreams shelved away, the friends lost to time, the daughter who rarely called anymore. Is this it? He whispered to himself, voice cracking in the stillness. Is this how it ends? The radio crackled with static, then a sudden voice cut through the monotony, a news anchor excitedly announcing Elon Musk's latest project. The Boring Company has just unveiled a new urban tunnel system that promises to cut city traffic by 70%, revolutionizing urban travel forever. Harold's ears perked up despite himself. Elon Musk, the name alone sounded like a spark in the darkness. A man who defied age, odds, and convention to reshape the future. Harold's mind raced back to images he'd seen online, sleek electric cars zipping underground, robotic drills boring tunnels beneath bustling cities, a future that looked more like science fiction than reality. Could such a bold vision be real? Could it happen in his lifetime? His fingers relaxed their grip, pulse quickening. For a moment, he felt a flicker, a glimpse of something he hadn't felt in years, hope. What if he could still be part of a future like that? What if the years behind him weren't a weight but a foundation? The idea felt reckless, almost foolish, but it ignited something inside Harold's tired heart. He pulled out his phone, thumb hesitating over the screen. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The words flashed from a video titled, "Never Too Old to Dream Big." Harold scrolled through the comments, stories of people in their 60s and 70s who'd started new careers, new adventures, new lives. The thought settled deep inside him, he wasn't alone. He wasn't invisible. The world wasn't done with him yet. The traffic jam stretched on, but now Harold's mind was racing faster than the cars in front of him. He pictured tunnels carving beneath the city, carving a path through the darkness. He pictured himself, not stuck in traffic or in time, but moving forward, steady, unstoppable, alive. The moment it all changed wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a small spark in the endless crawl of a hot summer day. A voice on the radio. A man's vision that dared to defy limits. And a heart, long dormant, waking up to possibility. As the sun dipped lower behind the gray clouds, Harold made a silent promise to himself, no more waiting. No more fading away. It's time to break through. The wheels of his car started moving again, and with them, something inside Harold shifted. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be doubts, setbacks, loneliness. But for the first time in a long time, Harold felt ready to face it all. The future wasn't a locked door. It was a tunnel waiting to be bored. A path waiting to be carved. And Harold was ready to pick up the drill. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Harold's house was a quiet place, filled with shadows that stretched long as the sun sank beyond the horizon. The walls held stories of laughter and love, but now they whispered only memories. Inside, the ticking of an old clock echoed through the stillness, marking time that felt both endless and too short. Harold sat in his worn recliner, fingers tracing the rim of a faded photo frame resting on the side table. It was a picture of a younger Harold, smiling broadly beside his wife, Margaret, on their wedding day. The years since had been unkind in ways no one prepared you for, the gradual fraying of relationships, the slow unraveling of dreams, and the quiet erosion of hope. Harold had worked at the local manufacturing plant for over 40 years, a steady, reliable man who found pride in his labor. The plant was now shut down, just another casualty of changing times and machines replacing men. His wife had passed 5 years ago after a long battle with illness, and since then, loneliness had crept in like a shadow he couldn't shake. His daughter, Lisa, lived across the country. Their phone calls had grown infrequent and strained. There was distance, not just physical, but emotional, between them that Harold didn't know how to bridge. He often wondered if she saw him as a relic of the past, someone who no longer mattered in her fast-moving life. Regret weighed heavy in his chest, the kind that pressed down harder with every day that passed. He thought about the things he never did, the inventions he never built, the stories he never told, the adventures he never dared to take. There was one memory that haunted him most, his old workshop in the basement. It had once been a sanctuary, filled with tools, half-finished projects, and the scent of sawdust and oil. It was where he felt alive, where he believed he could create something new. But time had taken it all away. The workshop was now dusty and silent, cluttered with forgotten parts and cold machines. The walls seemed to hold the ghosts of dreams abandoned too soon. Harold ran his hand across the workbench, feeling the roughness beneath his fingers. He remembered nights spent tinkering under the dim light, the thrill of possibility sparking in his veins. That Harold, the one with fire in his eyes, felt buried beneath years of routine and loss. He looked at the photo of Margaret again, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I should have tried harder," he whispered. "I should have done more." The house creaked with the passing of night, but Harold stayed awake, wrestling with the heavy truth: he had let himself fade. His body wasn't what it used to be, arthritis made mornings painful, and his breath came short when climbing stairs. The doctor's words echoed in his mind: "Take it easy, Harold. You need to slow down." But slowing down felt like surrender. There was a fire inside him, a spark that refused to die. Yet, where to channel it? How to find purpose when the world seemed to have moved on without him? The loneliness was suffocating, a deep ache that no amount of television or radio could fill. Friends had drifted away, some passing on, others caught in their own lives. Harold often sat by the window, watching the neighborhood bustle with people who seemed to have no time for an old man stuck in the past. Yet, beneath the surface of his quiet despair, a part of Harold still dreamed. He dreamed of breaking free, of shaking off the chains of age and regret. But the dream felt fragile, like glass, easily shattered by reality. And then, one night, as he scrolled through his phone looking for distractions, he stumbled upon an interview with Elon Musk. The man's relentless energy and refusal to accept limits struck a chord deep inside Harold's soul. Elon spoke about failure as a stepping stone, about daring to dream when others say no, about pushing boundaries regardless of the odds. Harold listened, captivated. The words stirred memories of his younger self, the man who believed he could build something meaningful. That night, Harold lay awake, the past and future colliding in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to change. Maybe the years behind him weren't a chain but a foundation. He thought about the tunnels Elon's company was digging, literally breaking through solid rock to create new paths. If Elon could revolutionize urban travel, could Harold find a way to revolutionize his own life? The question lingered, igniting a faint glow in the darkness. For the first time in years, Harold felt a flicker of hope, a whisper that his story wasn't finished yet. He remembered the promise he made that afternoon in traffic: no more waiting, no more fading away. The memory of the dusty workshop suddenly felt less like a tomb and more like a challenge. Could he reclaim it? Could he reignite the fire that had once burned so brightly? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The house was silent again, but inside Harold, a storm was brewing. He was ready to face the past, to wrestle with regrets, to confront loneliness, and to dare to dream once more. This was the life before the shift, heavy with loss, shadowed by doubt, but still pulsing with the possibility of change. Harold didn't know what the future held, but he was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, the best chapters were still unwritten. Harold's days became a battleground between hope and doubt, a constant inner war waged beneath the surface of quiet routines. The house still echoed with silence, but inside his mind, storms raged. Is it too late for me? He asked himself, the question a heavy weight pressing on his chest every morning. The idea of change teased him like a distant melody, sometimes clear and bright, sometimes drowned out by fear and exhaustion. His daughter Lisa's voice haunted his thoughts, distant and cool when they spoke on the phone, filled with subtle reminders that he was living in the past. "Dad, maybe you should just take it easy," she said once, gently but firmly. "You've done enough. You're not a young man anymore." Harold winced at the words, but he couldn't argue with the truth they carried. Yet inside, a stubborn ember burned, refusing to be snuffed out. The world around him seemed to echo Lisa's dismissal. His doctor's advice was cautious, laced with concern. "You need to slow down, Harold. No more heavy lifting, no sudden exertion. Your heart isn't what it used to be." The weight of those words pressed on him, like a judge's gavel sentencing him to a quieter, smaller existence. Even his neighbors and friends, once companions on long walks or casual chats, seemed to have accepted the idea that he was fading away, that his best days were behind him. At community gatherings, conversations about grandchildren and retirements left him feeling invisible, a spectator rather than a participant. But Harold's mind kept drifting back to Elon Musk. That man, decades younger but undeterred by risk or convention, was a symbol of rebellion against the limitations society imposed. Harold found himself tuning in to Elon's interviews and social media posts, where the billionaire entrepreneur spoke about pushing boundaries, embracing failure, and daring to dream when everyone else said no. One particular quote struck him deep: "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." Harold repeated the words like a mantra during his quiet moments, a lifeline thrown across the turbulent waters of his doubts. Yet the war inside him was far from won. Some days, the fear of failure crushed him. What if he tried and failed? What if his body gave out? What if no one cared? These questions circled relentlessly, each one a dark cloud threatening to snuff out the fragile flame of hope. At night, Harold lay awake, heart pounding, wrestling with his own shadows. Who am I now, he wondered. A man too old to change? Or someone still worthy of a second chance? The past whispered its doubts through memories of mistakes, lost chances, and broken promises. The future was an uncertain horizon, blurred by fear. One afternoon, after another dismissive phone call with Lisa, Harold's spirit cracked. He sat on his porch, watching the world move without him. The cars sped by, children laughed down the street, life flowed around him but didn't include him. He felt small, invisible, forgotten by the world he once knew. Then, his phone buzzed with a notification, a news alert about the Boring Company's latest tunnel breakthrough. A short video played, sleek electric vehicles gliding beneath a bustling city, engineers celebrating a successful drill through rock, Elon Musk's voice declaring, "We're not just building tunnels, we're building the future." Harold's chest tightened, a mix of envy and admiration flooding him. Here was a man who refused to be defined by limits. Suddenly, Harold felt a surge of defiance. "Why not me?" he muttered. "Why can't I be part of that future?" That evening, he pulled out a worn notebook he hadn't touched in years and began to write. At first, the words came haltingly, awkward and uncertain. But soon, pages filled with sketches and ideas. Inventions he dreamed of building, problems he wanted to solve, a vision of a life not resigned to waiting but bursting with purpose. The inner war was far from over, but Harold had chosen to fight. The next day, he told himself, he would clear out his dusty workshop. He would stop letting fear dictate his days. He would try, even if the odds seemed stacked against him. In the following weeks, Harold's battle continued. He faced skepticism from his neighbors, eye rolls from his daughter, and the stubborn ache of his own body. There were moments when the darkness threatened to consume him, when doubt whispered cruel lies: "You're too old. You're too weak. You're invisible." But in those moments, he remembered Elon's fearless gaze, the boldness of a man who dared to break through rock and doubt alike. Harold's rebellion was quiet but fierce. He started waking earlier, walking a little farther each day, his breath short but growing stronger. He cleaned out his basement workshop, dusting off tools and memories alike. Each sweep of his hand over the workbench was an act of reclaiming a part of himself long forgotten. He listened to podcasts about innovation and entrepreneurship, hungry for knowledge and inspiration. His heart beat in time with dreams long buried. Harold even reached out to Lisa, sending her a tentative text about his plans, hoping to bridge the distance. The reply was cautious but kind, a crack in the wall between them. The inner war was a battlefield where fear and hope clashed relentlessly. Some days, hope triumphed, lighting a path forward. Other days, fear pushed back, threatening to pull him under. But Harold was learning something vital: the war wasn't about winning or losing. It was about showing up, day after day, despite the odds. He wasn't alone in this fight. Around the world, men and women his age were breaking through their own walls, inspired by examples like Elon Musk, who refused to be defined by age or circumstance. Harold felt connected to a quiet revolution, a movement of those who dared to dream and act, no matter their years. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and setbacks. But for the first time in decades, Harold was not waiting for life to happen. He was making it happen. His inner war was the crucible forging a new self, one not limited by the past or by the fears of others, but fueled by courage, curiosity, and a fierce refusal to fade away. As the sun set each evening, Harold felt the battle within him settle into a tense peace. The war wasn't over, but he was standing his ground. And for the first time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, he could win. Harold stood in the dim light of his basement workshop, the smell of sawdust and oil filling the air like a familiar old friend. The clutter that had once felt like a tomb of forgotten dreams now seemed to pulse with quiet possibility. For weeks, he had wrestled with doubt and fear, but tonight, he made a choice. He would start small, but bold. He would build again. The first thing he did was clear the dust off his workbench, stacking away broken parts and rusted tools, making space for new projects. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted a worn toolbox, its hinges creaking in protest after years of neglect. He was no longer the man who waited, paralyzed by regrets. He was someone who dared to act. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless drive to build what others said was impossible, Harold decided to focus on something tangible, a project that would remind him he was still capable, still creative, still alive. He settled on designing a small device, a solar-powered garden light that could be assembled easily by anyone. It wasn't revolutionary by Silicon Valley standards, but for Harold, it was a spark. Something to get him moving again. Each evening, after the world outside had quieted down, Harold would descend into the basement. The flickering light above illuminated his worn hands as they carefully measured, cut, and he sat on his porch, watching the world move without him. The cars sped by, children laughed down the street, life flowed around him but didn't include him. He felt small, invisible, forgotten by the world he once knew. Then, his phone buzzed with a notification, a news alert about the Boring Company's latest tunnel breakthrough. A short video played, sleek electric vehicles gliding beneath a bustling city, engineers celebrating a successful drill through rock, Elon Musk's voice declaring, "We're not just building tunnels, we're building the future." Harold's chest tightened, a mix of envy and admiration flooding him. Here was a man who refused to be defined by limits. Suddenly, Harold felt a surge of defiance. "Why not me?" he muttered. "Why can't I be part of that future?" That evening, he pulled out a worn notebook he hadn't touched in years and began to write. At first, the words came haltingly, awkward and uncertain. But soon, pages filled with sketches and ideas. Inventions he dreamed of building, problems he wanted to solve, a vision of a life not resigned to waiting but bursting with purpose. The inner war was far from over, but Harold had chosen to fight. The next day, he told himself, he would clear out his dusty workshop. He would stop letting fear dictate his days. He would try, even if the odds seemed stacked against him. In the following weeks, Harold's battle continued. He faced skepticism from his neighbors, eye rolls from his daughter, and the stubborn ache of his own body. There were moments when the darkness threatened to consume him, when doubt whispered cruel lies, "You're too old. You're too weak. You're invisible." But in those moments, he remembered Elon's fearless gaze, the boldness of a man who dared to break through rock and doubt alike. Harold's rebellion was quiet but fierce. He started waking earlier, walking a little farther each day, his breath short but growing stronger. He cleaned out his basement workshop, dusting off tools and memories alike. Each sweep of his hand over the workbench was an act of reclaiming a part of himself long forgotten. He listened to podcasts about innovation and entrepreneurship, hungry for knowledge and inspiration. His heart beat in time with dreams long buried. Harold even reached out to Lisa, sending her a tentative text about his plans, hoping to bridge the distance. The reply was cautious but kind, a crack in the wall between them. The inner war was a battlefield where fear and hope clashed relentlessly. Some days, hope triumphed, lighting a path forward. Other days, fear pushed back, threatening to pull him under. But Harold was learning something vital: the war wasn't about winning or losing. It was about showing up, day after day, despite the odds. He wasn't alone in this fight. Around the world, men and women his age were breaking through their own walls, inspired by examples like Elon Musk, who refused to be defined by age or circumstance. Harold felt connected to a quiet revolution, a movement of those who dared to dream and act, no matter their years. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and setbacks. But for the first time in decades, Harold was not waiting for life to happen. He was making it happen. His inner war was the crucible forging a new self, one not limited by the past or by the fears of others, but fueled by courage, curiosity, and a fierce refusal to fade away. As the sun set each evening, Harold felt the battle within him settle into a tense peace. The war wasn't over, but he was standing his ground. And for the first time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, he could win. Harold stood in the dim light of his basement workshop, the smell of sawdust and oil filling the air like a familiar old friend. The clutter that had once felt like a tomb of forgotten dreams now seemed to pulse with quiet possibility. For weeks, he had wrestled with doubt and fear, but tonight, he made a choice. He would start small, but bold. He would build again. The first thing he did was clear the dust off his workbench, stacking away broken parts and rusted tools, making space for new projects. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted a worn toolbox, its hinges creaking in protest after years of neglect. He was no longer the man who waited, paralyzed by regrets. He was someone who dared to act. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless drive to build what others said was impossible, Harold decided to focus on something tangible, a project that would remind him he was still capable, still creative, still alive. He settled on designing a small device, a solar-powered garden light that could be assembled easily by anyone. It wasn't revolutionary by Silicon Valley standards, but for Harold, it was a spark. Something to get him moving again. Each evening, after the world outside had quieted down, Harold would descend into the basement. The flickering light above illuminated his worn hands as they carefully measured, cut, and assembled. The hum of his soldering iron, the clink of metal pieces, the scratch of pencil on paper, these were the sounds of hope returning. His joints ached, and sometimes frustration threatened to overwhelm him, but he pushed on, fueled by a newfound purpose. Sometimes, he imagined Elon Musk standing beside him, urging him to keep going, to embrace failure as a lesson, to refuse to give up. The work was slow but steady. Harold found himself remembering the excitement of invention, the thrill of seeing an idea take shape, the joy of creation. As the days turned into weeks, something remarkable began to happen. The small solar garden light wasn't just a product, it became a symbol of his transformation. It reminded him that even the smallest change could light up the darkest places. One evening, as Harold tested the prototype in his backyard, the soft glow of the light cast long shadows on the grass. He stood back, a rare smile touching his lips. The light flickered steadily, a beacon in the night. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. That night, he reached out to Lisa again, sending photos of his project. Her reply was hesitant but encouraging, "That looks amazing, Dad. Proud of you." The words warmed Harold's heart more than he expected. This small connection, fragile and tentative, was a bridge to a past and a future he feared were lost. Encouraged, Harold began sharing his journey online. He started a blog, writing about rediscovering purpose at his age, about the fear and hope entwined in every step. He didn't know if anyone would read it, but the act of writing itself was liberating. He poured out his soul in raw, honest posts, no clichés, just real stories of struggle and small victories. To his surprise, comments began trickling in. People his age, and younger too, thanked him for sharing, said his story inspired them to try something new. Harold wasn't alone anymore. The digital world, vast and impersonal, became a place of connection and encouragement. Each message was a thread weaving him back into the fabric of life. But even as hope grew, the world pushed back. Lisa remained distant at times, her skepticism a wall he struggled to breach. Neighbors whispered doubts. His body reminded him daily of its limits. One afternoon, his doctor's voice was stern, "Harold, don't push too hard. Listen to your body." The word stung, but Harold had learned to listen to more than just pain. He listened to the fire inside him that refused to be extinguished. Balancing caution and courage was a delicate dance. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A local community center heard about Harold's blog and invited him to give a talk on staying active and creative in later life. Standing in front of a small audience of familiar faces, Harold felt the old fear creep in. What if he faltered? What if no one cared? But then he saw their eyes, curious, hopeful, hungry for stories that resonated with their own struggles. He shared his journey honestly, spoke about Elon Musk's influence as a symbol of fearless persistence, and how even the smallest choices could spark transformation. At the end of the talk, hands raised with questions, smiles, and tears. People came forward to thank him for sharing, to tell their own stories of hidden dreams and renewed hope. In that moment, Harold felt something he hadn't in years. Belonging. The shift wasn't just about building a device or writing a blog. It was about reclaiming a place in the world. It was about proving to himself that age was not a cage but a lens through which to see new possibilities. Encouraged by this, Harold started volunteering at the community center, helping others discover their passions. He collaborated with a group of seniors interested in simple engineering projects, guiding them with patience and enthusiasm. The basement workshop, once a place of solitude, now buzzed with activity. Friends old and new stopped by, drawn by the light of purpose Harold was nurturing. Each small victory, whether a completed project, a shared story, a laugh with a friend, built momentum. Harold felt the walls of loneliness crumble, replaced by connection and meaning. The journey wasn't linear. There were setbacks, tools breaking, projects failing, exhaustion setting in. But each challenge was met with determination born from the belief that change was possible, no matter the odds. Harold's story began to ripple beyond his neighborhood. His blog caught the attention of a local newspaper, which ran a feature about his late-life reinvention inspired by Elon Musk's relentless spirit. The article painted Harold as an emblem of hope for those who felt left behind by time. With newfound visibility, Harold received messages from people across the country, letters from seniors rekindling old passions, from families inspired to reconnect with their elders, from young people reminded that age was not a barrier but a bridge. Harold's phone buzzed one evening with a call he hadn't expected. It was Lisa. Her voice was softer, more open than before. "Dad, I've been reading your blog. I'm sorry I didn't understand before. I'm proud of you." Tears blurred Harold's vision. The bridge was growing stronger, built on honesty and hope. The one thing Harold changed wasn't a grand invention or a world-altering idea. It was his choice to move, physically, emotionally, spiritually, toward life. He chose to rebuild, to connect, to risk failure. That choice, seemingly small, lit a fire that spread through every corner of his world. Elon Musk's tunnels carved through Earth, breaking barriers that once seemed immovable. Harold carved through his own barriers, the isolation, the fear, the doubt, to create a path forward. The light in his backyard glowed steadily as night settled in. It was a beacon, yes, but more than that, it was a testament. A testament to the power of choosing one thing to change, to start moving when the world says stop, to believe in possibility when others have given up. Harold was no longer waiting for permission to matter. He was living it. The morning sun filtered through the cracked blinds, casting long, golden streaks across Harold's living room. He sat at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the radio filling the quiet, but his mind was elsewhere, on the moments that had led him here. After months of small steps, quiet victories, and stubborn persistence, something had begun to shift in a way he hadn't dared to imagine. His blog posts had slowly gained traction, drawing comments from readers who found hope in his honesty and courage. The local newspaper feature had brought even more attention, and Harold had received invitations to speak at senior centers and community events. Each story he shared seemed to ripple outward, connecting him to a network of people rediscovering their own purpose. Yet, it wasn't just about the recognition. It was about something deeper, a breakthrough that touched his soul. One afternoon, as Harold was tinkering in his basement workshop, the phone rang. The screen flashed Lisa's name. He hesitated, then answered. "Dad," she said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about you lately. I want to visit." The words caught Harold off guard, stirring a mixture of joy and uncertainty. Lisa had always been distant, caught up in her busy life, their relationship frayed by years of silence. Yet here she was, reaching out, offering a chance to heal old wounds. The visit was tentative at first. Lisa arrived with her teenage son, Michael, quiet but curious about the man who had been a shadow in their lives. Harold welcomed them with nervous excitement, showing them the basement workshop that had become his sanctuary. He shared his journey, the fear, the hope, the stubborn refusal to fade away. Lisa listened, her eyes reflecting a mixture of regret and admiration. Michael, usually reserved, asked questions about the inventions and the solar garden light. For the first time, Harold saw himself through their eyes, not as an old man stuck in the past, but as someone still capable of wonder and creation. The days that followed were filled with small moments of connection. A shared meal, stories around the kitchen table, laughter echoing through the house. Harold realized that breaking through wasn't just about personal transformation, it was about mending the broken bridges that time and distance had worn thin. Yet, vulnerability brought its own challenges. Old arguments surfaced, doubts and fears clashed, and the path to reconciliation was uneven. There were moments when Harold questioned if the breakthrough was real or just a fleeting dream. But he kept returning to the lessons he had learned from Elon Musk, the courage to persist, to face failure and rejection with resilience, to believe in the power of change. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Lisa turned to him. "Dad, I'm sorry for all the years I shut you out. I see now that you're more than I ever gave you credit for." Harold's throat tightened. "I'm sorry too, Lisa. For not reaching out sooner." They embraced, the years of silence melting into a new beginning. Harold felt the breakthrough ripple through his heart, a moment of victory mixed with vulnerability, raw emotion entwined with hope. His solar garden light continued to glow steadily outside, a symbol of his journey from darkness into light. The breakthrough wasn't a sudden miracle but a series of small steps, a mosaic of courage, connection, and relentless hope. Harold realized that breaking through was not the end of struggle but the beginning of something new, a legacy of resilience, love, and purpose rediscovered. He thought about Elon Musk's tunnels once more, carving new paths beneath the earth. Harold was carving his own paths, through regret, loneliness, and fear, creating spaces where life could flourish again. The breakthrough had changed everything. Harold was no longer a man waiting to fade away. He was a man breaking through, shining his light into the world, and inviting others to do the same. Harold stood on the porch of his small suburban home, the evening breeze carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. The world around him had shifted in ways he never expected, not just outside but deep within himself. He looked out over the quiet street, familiar and comforting, yet somehow transformed by the journey he had taken. This was no longer the house of a man resigned to fading away, it was the home of someone who had reclaimed his place in the story of life. The breakthrough had opened doors he thought were forever closed, doors to connection, purpose, and meaning. His relationship with Lisa had blossomed from tentative visits into regular, heartfelt conversations. Michael, her son, now called him Grandpa Harold with genuine affection, bridging a gap Harold had feared would never close. The solar garden light prototype had evolved into a small line of simple, affordable products designed for seniors looking to reclaim independence and creativity. His blog had grown into a vibrant community, a digital gathering place where stories of late-life transformation were shared and celebrated. Harold often thought about how far he had come, from the loneliness and doubt that once enveloped him to this moment of quiet triumph. The journey had not been easy. There were days when fear and fatigue threatened to pull him back into shadows. But each time, he remembered the spark that had ignited it all, Elon Musk's fearless example of radical thinking and refusal to accept limits. Harold realized that legacy wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about the impact one left on the lives around them. The courage to start anew, the willingness to break through barriers, and the generosity to share that journey with others. He wanted his legacy to be a beacon for those who felt forgotten, a reminder that life could be rewritten at any age. One afternoon, as Harold prepared for a speaking engagement at a regional senior center, he paused to reflect on the lessons he wanted to share. He thought about the moment when he had first stumbled upon Elon Musk's words, how those words had sparked a fire when all seemed lost. He planned to tell his audience that it wasn't about being fearless, it was about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. That the odds were often stacked against us, but the choice to act was what defined us. The event was packed with faces both eager and skeptical. Harold spoke from the heart, weaving his personal story with universal truths. He shared his struggles with regret and loneliness, the battles with his own mind and body, and the small but bold choices that led to transformation. As he spoke, he noticed heads nodding, eyes glistening with recognition. After the talk, people approached with stories of their own struggles and hopes. One woman shared how she had given up on painting after her husband died but felt inspired to pick up her brushes again. A man spoke of reconnecting with his estranged daughter. Harold realized that his journey had become a mirror reflecting the dreams and fears of many. The new legacy was alive and growing. Harold's days were now filled with a sense of mission. He mentored other seniors interested in creative projects, helped organize community workshops, and volunteered to teach digital literacy. Each act was a thread in a tapestry of renewed life and connection. Lisa and Michael became frequent visitors, often joining him in the basement workshop where laughter and ideas now flowed freely. Harold sometimes caught himself smiling at the rhythm of his new life, a life that had once seemed impossible. He thought about the tunnels Elon Musk was building beneath cities, paths carved through stone and earth to connect places and people faster and more efficiently. Harold's legacy was like those tunnels, quiet but strong, breaking through walls of isolation and doubt to connect hearts and minds. One evening, Harold sat on the porch, the solar garden lights glowing softly around him. He reflected on how he used to believe he was too old to matter, too tired to change. Now he knew the truth. He had just been waiting for permission to matter again, and he had given it to himself. The feeling was liberating and humbling all at once. Harold understood that legacy wasn't something handed down or inherited, it was something forged in the everyday choices to keep moving forward, to keep believing, to keep loving. He felt a deep gratitude for the journey, for the people who had supported him, and for the spark that had set it all in motion. The night sky stretched above him, vast and full of possibilities. Harold knew the road ahead would have challenges, but he also knew he was no longer walking it alone. His story had become a beacon, a new beginning for himself and for others who dared to believe in the power of transformation. "I was never too old," he whispered to the stars, "I was just waiting for permission to matter again." And with that, Harold smiled, the light in his heart shining brighter than ever before. Harold woke to the gentle tapping of rain against his window, a soft rhythm that matched the quiet stirring inside him. The years had taught him to savor moments like this, when the world outside slowed down, inviting reflection and renewed resolve. Sitting in his favorite armchair, warmed by a thick wool blanket, he opened his journal, a habit he had adopted since his transformation began. The pages were filled with thoughts, dreams, regrets, and plans, a map of his journey from despair to hope. Today's entry was different. Today, Harold felt the pull of something deeper, not just the story of his own rebirth, but the call to think bigger, beyond his immediate world. Inspired by Elon Musk's vision to reshape cities and even worlds, Harold wondered how he could extend his newfound purpose. How could he ensure his legacy wasn't just a flicker but a lasting flame? His mind wandered back to the early days when he first heard about the Boring Company's tunnels. Elon's radical idea to revolutionize urban travel by digging beneath the chaos of the city had seemed audacious, almost absurd. Yet here Harold was, living proof that audacity was the birthplace of change. He thought about the parallels, how both Elon and he had faced skepticism, doubt, and the weight of convention. Elon pushed boundaries not just with technology but with mindset, challenging what was possible at any age, any stage, any circumstance. Harold wanted to embrace that same radical spirit, not by building tunnels or rockets, but by breaking the mental barriers that trapped so many seniors in a cycle of invisibility and despair. The rain slowed, and the sky lightened as Harold grabbed his coat and headed out for a walk. The neighborhood was peaceful, houses lined with trees just beginning to shed their leaves. As he walked, he noticed faces, some worn with age and worry, others vibrant with hidden stories waiting to be told. He imagined the lives behind those doors, the dreams deferred, the potential waiting to be awakened. Harold's own journey had taught him the power of small acts, a choice to build, to speak, to connect. But now he felt ready for something more, a community initiative to inspire and empower others like him. That afternoon, Harold visited the local library and community center, places that had once felt distant but now pulsed with opportunity. He spoke with coordinators about organizing workshops where seniors could explore technology, creativity, and entrepreneurship. The idea was met with warmth and enthusiasm. Together, they sketched out plans for a program that would combine hands-on projects with storytelling, blending Harold's experience with practical skills. Over the next weeks, Harold poured himself into the project. He recruited volunteers, designed curricula, and reached out through his blog to invite participants. The workshops became a gathering place for people who had felt overlooked, offering a space where age was celebrated as wisdom, not limitation. Harold taught basic engineering, digital literacy, and creative writing, encouraging participants to share their stories and ideas. The basement workshop buzzed with energy on workshop days, filled with laughter, focused chatter, and the scratch of pens on paper. Among the participants was Evelyn, a retired schoolteacher who had lost her passion for painting after her husband passed. Inspired by Harold's journey, she picked up her brushes again, creating vibrant canvases that told stories of love, loss, and renewal. There was James, a former factory worker who discovered a talent for building small gadgets, his hands steady and sure despite arthritis. Harold saw in them reflections of himself, the fear, the hope, the fierce desire to matter. One evening, after a particularly lively workshop, Harold sat with Lisa and Michael around the kitchen table. Michael showed his grandfather a drawing he had made, a futuristic city with tunnels and flying cars. "It's like the future you talk about," Michael said, eyes shining with excitement. Harold smiled, feeling the full circle of their connection. The past, present, and future all intertwined in this moment of shared dreams. But even as momentum grew, Harold remained grounded in reality. He knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, skepticism from some, physical limits, moments of doubt. Yet he also knew that every breakthrough began with a single step, a single act of courage. Harold's journey was no longer just his own. It had become a movement, a ripple of change that, like Elon Musk's tunnels, aimed to break through barriers and connect isolated lives. On a crisp autumn morning, Harold stood before a crowd gathered at the community center for the launch of the new workshop series. He looked out over faces eager for inspiration and practical tools. He spoke of courage, of the power to rewrite one's story, and of the radical idea that age was not a boundary but a gateway to new beginnings. "We may not be digging tunnels beneath cities," he said with a smile, "but we are digging deep within ourselves to discover new paths." The applause was warm and heartfelt. Harold felt a surge of gratitude, not just for the journey he had traveled but for the path unfolding ahead. That night, as he returned home, he paused on his porch, the soft glow of the garden lights illuminating his way. The stars were bright above, silent witnesses to the legacy he was building. Harold knew the future was uncertain, but it was full of promise. He was no longer a man defined by age or regret but by resilience and vision. Like Elon Musk, he had embraced the impossible and carved a new path, not beneath the earth, but through the human spirit. And in doing so, he had found his true legacy. Harold never imagined how far his small steps would carry him. It began with a single blog post, a modest solar garden light prototype, a fractured relationship slowly mending. Now, as autumn deepened and the trees outside his window painted the world in fiery hues, he stood at the center of a growing community of seniors rediscovering purpose. The ripple effect was real. In the months since launching the workshop series at the community center, Harold watched with quiet pride as lives transformed. Evelyn's paintings were displayed in a local gallery, drawing visitors who marveled at the depth and vibrancy of her late-blooming art. James built his first custom tool with his own hands and had started mentoring others who struggled with mobility. Stories poured in from across the region, shared through the online forum Harold had helped create, a digital gathering place where courage and creativity blossomed. Yet, for Harold, the ripple effect was more than visible accomplishments. It was the intangible shifts in attitude, the renewed belief that life's chapters were still being written. One morning, while scrolling through messages on his tablet, Harold paused at a note from a woman named Clara. She was 72, living in a small town hundreds of miles away, and she wrote about feeling invisible after retirement. But reading Harold's story had inspired her to start a community garden and volunteer at the local library. "You showed me that it's never too late to plant new seeds," Clara wrote. Harold smiled, the warmth of connection reaching across the miles. This was the power of storytelling, the ability to ignite hope and action in places far beyond his own doorstep. As winter settled in, Harold's days were busier than ever. Between workshops, speaking engagements, and mentoring, he found little time to rest. But even in the fatigue, there was fulfillment, a sense that his purpose was unfolding exactly as it should. Lisa and Michael became integral to this new rhythm. Lisa had begun documenting the journey through video, capturing moments of struggle and triumph with honesty and grace. Michael, once shy and reserved, now led tech support for the workshops, bridging generational gaps with patience and enthusiasm. One evening, as snowflakes drifted softly outside, Harold gathered with a group of workshop participants around the fireplace at the community center. Stories were shared, of loss, resilience, and unexpected joys. Laughter mingled with tears, weaving a tapestry of shared humanity. Harold listened as Ruth, a widow who had lost her passion for writing, read aloud a poem she had written after the workshops rekindled her voice. The room was silent, moved by the raw beauty of her words. Moments like these reminded Harold why he had embarked on this journey, not for accolades or recognition, but for the simple, profound act of helping others find light in their own lives. Yet, amid the warmth and progress, Harold remained aware of the challenges that persisted. Ageism lingered in subtle and overt ways, from dismissive comments to institutional barriers. Some skeptics questioned the value of investing in seniors, doubting their capacity to contribute meaningfully. Harold met these challenges with the same resilience he had cultivated within himself, addressing doubts with patience, sharing stories that shattered stereotypes, and advocating for inclusion. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless drive to innovate despite criticism, Harold pushed forward, determined to reshape not just individual lives but societal attitudes. One day, as he prepared for a panel discussion on aging and innovation, Harold reflected on how far he had come from the man who once believed his best days were behind him. The panel brought together experts in technology, healthcare, and community development to explore ways to empower older adults. Harold's voice, grounded in personal experience and hard-earned wisdom, resonated with authenticity. He spoke passionately about the need to create environments where seniors could thrive, innovate, and contribute. His message was clear: aging was not a barrier but a frontier of opportunity. The panel's impact rippled outward, sparking conversations in local governments and nonprofit organizations. Harold found himself collaborating with new partners, expanding the reach of his workshops and initiatives. Each connection strengthened the network of support and inspiration. Back at home, Harold continued to nurture his own creative projects. The solar garden light had evolved into a series of practical inventions designed with seniors in mind, tools that emphasized ease, safety, and independence. His workshop buzzed with activity, a testament to the enduring power of hands-on creation. Lisa's videos chronicled these innovations, capturing moments of trial and error, breakthroughs and setbacks. Together, they crafted a narrative of resilience and possibility. Late one night, Harold sat in his workshop, surrounded by sketches and prototypes. He thought about Elon Musk's vision of tunneling beneath cities, creating new pathways where there had been only barriers. Harold smiled at the metaphor. It was exactly what he was doing, in his own way, beneath the surface of age and doubt. He was digging tunnels of hope, connecting isolated hearts, and paving the way for a future where no one was left behind. The ripple effect was no longer just a concept, it was a living, breathing movement. Harold understood that his legacy was unfolding not in grand gestures but in countless small acts of courage, creativity, and connection. As winter deepened and the first snow blanketed the ground, Harold felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had transformed him from a man fading into the background into a beacon of light for others. The ripple effect was just beginning, and the future stretched before him, wide and full of promise. The cold January air bit gently at Harold's cheeks as he stepped out onto the sidewalk, the crunch of frost beneath his boots echoing softly in the quiet neighborhood. Winter had settled in fully now, coating the world in white, but inside Harold's heart, a new warmth was growing, a resolve to heal, to rebuild, to reconnect. His journey of transformation had rekindled more than just his own spirit, it had stirred in him a longing to mend the broken bridges of his past, especially the one with his oldest friend, Frank. Frank had been Harold's companion since their youth, a bond forged through shared dreams and countless adventures. Yet time and silence had frayed that bond, leaving a gulf of misunderstandings and unspoken regrets. The last time they spoke was years ago, a bitter argument fueled by pride and fear. Harold had carried the weight of that loss for decades, the ache of absence gnawing quietly beneath his daily routines. Inspired by the breakthroughs he had experienced, and the bridges he had begun to rebuild with Lisa and Michael, Harold decided it was time to reach out. The process was neither easy nor swift. He started by drafting a letter, simple, honest, free of blame, filled with the hope of reconciliation. He hesitated before sending it, nerves twisting in his stomach, but he knew this was another step in his journey, an act of courage to break through the walls of silence and hurt. Days passed with no reply, and doubt began to creep in. Had Frank moved on? Was the damage too deep? But just as Harold was beginning to lose hope, the phone rang one crisp morning. The voice on the other end was older, weathered, but unmistakably Frank's. "Harold," he said, a pause hanging between them, "I've been waiting for this call." Their reunion was both tender and tentative. They met at the old cafe where they had once spent endless afternoons dreaming about the future. The familiarity of the place softened the edges of years apart. Over cups of steaming coffee, they shared stories, regrets, losses, joys, and for the first time in a long while, the past felt less like a burden and more like a bridge. Frank spoke of his own battles, loneliness after his wife passed, the ache of missed opportunities, the struggle to find meaning in his later years. Harold listened, realizing how much their stories mirrored each other. The reconnection wasn't a magic fix, it was a beginning, a fragile thread being rewoven with patience and honesty. Over the following weeks, their friendship deepened, fueled by shared projects and renewed trust. Frank joined Harold's workshops, bringing his woodworking skills and quiet wisdom to the community. Together, they built benches for the community garden, their hands steady despite age, their spirits lifted by purpose. This act of rebuilding bridges extended beyond Frank. Harold found himself reaching out to other estranged family members and old friends, opening conversations that had long been closed. Each reconnection brought its own challenges and rewards, a mixture of awkwardness, healing, and renewed affection. The process reminded Harold that transformation was not just about moving forward but also about embracing the past with grace. One afternoon, as Harold and Frank worked side by side in the workshop, Harold shared a quote from Elon Musk that had always resonated with him: "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." Their friendship, fragile but vital, was important enough to fight for. The act of rebuilding brought new layers of meaning to Harold's life. It reminded him that relationships were living things, requiring care, vulnerability, and courage. And it showed him that it was never too late to heal, to forgive, to reconnect. Harold's story of rebuilding bridges spread through the community, inspiring others to reach out and mend their own fractured relationships. Letters, calls, and reunions blossomed in the wake of his example. The ripple effect continued to grow, touching lives in ways Harold had only dreamed possible. In the quiet moments, Harold reflected on how far he had come, from a man isolated by regret to one connected by love and purpose. He thought of Elon Musk's tunnels again, pathways carved through stone and earth to link places and people. Harold was carving his own tunnels through the barriers of time, silence, and fear, creating pathways back to those who mattered most. The winter days grew longer, and with them, Harold's hope blossomed. He understood now that legacy was not just about achievements or inventions but about the bonds we rebuild and nurture. And as he stood beside Frank one crisp morning, watching the sunrise paint the sky with promise, Harold felt a profound peace. The bridges rebuilt were more than connections, they were lifelines to the future, anchors in the present, and testaments to the enduring power of friendship and forgiveness. Harold's journey was far from over, but in the act of rebuilding, he had found a new beginning, one grounded in love, resilience, and the courage to reach out and say, "I'm still here. Let's walk together." Harold's days were filled with a newfound rhythm. Workshops, visits with Lisa and Michael, quiet evenings with a journal in hand. Yet amid this busy, purposeful life, he felt a restless spark urging him forward, deeper into uncharted territory. It was a feeling he hadn't known in years, the urge not only to learn but to teach, to share, to become a mentor in the truest sense. One chilly afternoon, as Harold tinkered in his workshop, the phone rang. On the other end was a young woman named Jasmine, a volunteer at the local community center who had heard about Harold's story through Lisa's videos. Jasmine was in her late 20s, bright-eyed and eager but struggling with self-doubt and uncertainty about her own future. She confessed she felt stuck, caught between societal expectations and the desire to create something meaningful. Harold listened intently, remembering all too well the heaviness of feeling invisible and unmoored. Without hesitation, he offered to meet and talk. Their first meeting was tentative but promising. Jasmine was nervous but curious, and Harold found himself drawn to her energy and openness. He shared stories of his own journey, the regrets, the breakthroughs, the moments of fear and hope. Jasmine spoke of her dreams of starting a non-profit to support disadvantaged youth, but also of the paralyzing fear of failure. Harold saw in Jasmine the same spark that had reignited his own life, and he resolved to help nurture it. Over the following weeks, their meetings became a regular fixture, sessions filled with brainstorming, encouragement, and practical advice. Harold taught Jasmine about resilience, about embracing failure as a stepping stone, and about the radical idea that age and experience were assets, not limitations. He also learned from Jasmine's fresh perspective and energy, which infused his own journey with new excitement. Their relationship evolved into a true mentorship, a bridge between generations fueled by mutual respect and shared purpose. Inspired by Elon Musk's example of fearless innovation and relentless pursuit of vision, Harold encouraged Jasmine to think big and act boldly. He reminded her that the odds might never be perfect, but progress came from taking the first step. Jasmine's nonprofit idea began to take shape, supported by Harold's guidance and the resources of the community center. Together, they navigated funding applications, outreach strategies, and program design. The partnership was a testament to the power of intergenerational collaboration, two lives enriched by the exchange of wisdom and hope. Meanwhile, Harold's own projects flourished. His inventions found new applications, and his workshops expanded to neighboring towns. The community center buzzed with activity and shared purpose. One evening, after a successful event, Harold and Jasmine sat on the porch of his house, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. Jasmine thanked Harold for believing in her when she doubted herself. Harold smiled, grateful for the reminder that mentorship was a two-way street, a relationship that nurtured both giver and receiver. "You remind me of something Elon Musk once said," Harold said quietly. "Persistence is very important. You should not give up unless you are forced to give up." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully, the words settling between them like a shared promise. The unexpected mentor role brought Harold new meaning and joy. It connected him to a broader mission, one that transcended his own story and reached into the future. He realized that transformation was not just personal but communal, woven through relationships and shared dreams. Harold's journey had come full circle, from a man struggling to find purpose in the twilight years to a guiding light for others stepping into their own. The ripple effect was gaining momentum, fueled by courage, connection, and the refusal to accept limits. As winter gave way to spring, Harold and Jasmine prepared to launch a joint initiative, an intergenerational innovation lab where seniors and youth could collaborate on creative projects. The lab symbolized everything Harold believed in: breaking barriers, building bridges, and nurturing the spark of possibility at any age. The launch day was filled with excitement and hope. Participants of all ages gathered to share ideas, learn new skills, and inspire each other. Harold watched with pride as Jasmine took the lead, her confidence shining brightly. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The legacy he had once feared was slipping through his fingers was now being built hand in hand with others, across generations, across challenges, across doubts. Harold understood that life's transformations were ongoing, not confined to any single moment or milestone. They were a continuous dance of learning, teaching, falling, and rising. As the sun set on that hopeful day, Harold stood outside the community center, the cool breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. He reflected on the unexpected mentor role that had blossomed from his own journey. It was a role that transcended age and expectation, rooted in the simple but powerful act of believing in others, and in oneself. Harold knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of uncertainty and fear. But armed with the lessons of resilience, connection, and radical hope, he was ready. Like Elon Musk tunneling beneath cities to reshape the future, Harold was carving a path beneath the surface of doubt and limitation, building a legacy of courage, compassion, and endless possibility. Harold sat quietly in his workshop as a fierce storm raged outside. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows, and the rain beat down in relentless sheets, blurring the world beyond his walls. Inside, the warmth from the small heater fought against the chill creeping into the corners of the room, but the real storm was not outside, it was within him. Despite the progress and the hope that had blossomed in recent months, doubt had begun to creep into Harold's mind. He wrestled with the familiar question that had haunted him for years: was this change sustainable? Could a man his age truly reshape a life long defined by limitations? The relentless pace of his new responsibilities, mentoring Jasmine, running workshops, developing his inventions, left him drained. Some days, the weight of fatigue threatened to crush the fragile optimism he had worked so hard to build. On this stormy evening, Harold allowed himself to sit with the discomfort, the fear, and the uncertainty. The shadows cast by the flickering lamp seemed to mirror the shadows in his mind. He thought of Elon Musk, how the visionary had faced countless setbacks, critics, and failures yet pressed on. Persistence is very important, Elon had said, and Harold clung to those words like a lifeline. Yet, even Musk had moments of doubt, and so did Harold. The night stretched on, and Harold's thoughts grew darker. He recalled the doctor's warnings from years before, the voices telling him to slow down, to accept decline. The ache in his joints, the occasional shortness of breath, reminders of a body that was not as young as it once was. Could he really keep going? As the storm outside intensified, a sudden power outage plunged the workshop into darkness. Harold sat in the silence, the blackout forcing him into stillness. In that moment, he felt the full weight of vulnerability, not just physical but emotional. The journey had been a battle against invisibility, against the fear of being forgotten. Now, faced with the rawness of the storm, Harold confronted the fear head-on. But then, a soft glow appeared, the faint light of his phone screen, a message notification breaking through the darkness. It was from Jasmine. "Remember why you started," it read simply. "You're not alone." That message was a spark in the night. Harold pulled a blanket around his shoulders and opened a notebook, beginning to write. He wrote about the storm outside and the storm within, about fear and hope, about the fragile beauty of persistence. He reminded himself that transformation was not a straight line but a journey marked by setbacks and breakthroughs. The storm passed by morning, leaving a world washed clean and glistening with fresh promise. The sun filtered through the curtains as Harold prepared for the day ahead, feeling renewed resolve. He reached out to Jasmine and the workshop community, sharing his reflections and inviting them to share their own storms. The response was immediate and heartfelt, stories of struggle, courage, and determination poured in. Harold realized that vulnerability was not weakness but strength, a bridge that connected people in their shared humanity. The storm had tested him, but it had also deepened his understanding of resilience. He saw now that facing fear was part of the transformation, not a detour from it. As winter thawed into spring, Harold's work gained new momentum. The Intergenerational Innovation Lab flourished, a vibrant space where challenges were met with creativity and collaboration. Participants tackled projects with energy and determination, inspired by Harold's openness and tenacity. One day, a local newspaper ran a feature on Harold's journey, highlighting not just his inventions but the community he had helped build. The story resonated widely, sparking conversations about aging, purpose, and possibility. Harold received letters and calls from seniors across the country, many saying that his story had inspired them to take their own first steps toward change. The ripple effect was real and growing. Yet Harold remained humble, grounded in the knowledge that every breakthrough came with struggle. He continued to face challenges, physical aches, moments of doubt, the ever-present awareness of time's passage. But he met each challenge with the fierce hope that had carried him this far. One afternoon, as he worked with Jasmine and a group of young volunteers on a new community project, Harold paused to look around the room. The energy, the creativity, the shared purpose, it was a living testament to the power of transformation. Harold smiled, knowing that his journey was far from over. Like Elon Musk's tunnels beneath cities, carving new pathways where none existed before, Harold was carving his own tunnels through fear and limitation. And in those tunnels, light was beginning to shine. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Harold stood in front of the full-length mirror in his bedroom, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains and casting a gentle glow over the room. For a moment, he didn't recognize the man staring back at him. The lines on his face seemed less like marks of aging and more like stories etched in stone, stories of resilience, courage, and transformation. The reflection wasn't just of a man who had lived through decades but of someone who had reinvented himself, step by determined step, against the odds. It was a process Harold hadn't imagined possible just a year ago when the world felt like it was closing in. But here he was, a living testament to the idea that reinvention was not just for the young or the privileged, it was a right and a possibility for everyone, especially those society often overlooked. His journey had taught him that reinvention wasn't about erasing the past or pretending to be someone new. It was about embracing every part of himself. His regrets, his hopes, his failures, and weaving them into a new narrative. A narrative defined not by what he had lost but by what he could still create. The day ahead was filled with promise. Harold had been invited to speak at a local senior center about the power of reinvention in later life. The invitation felt like a milestone, an opportunity to share his story and inspire others to take their own first steps toward change. As he prepared his notes, Harold reflected on the core message he wanted to convey, that it's never too late to redefine yourself, to pursue new passions, and to build a life filled with purpose and joy. He thought of Elon Musk, a figure who symbolized radical reinvention on a grand scale, relentlessly pushing boundaries and defying expectations. While Harold's scale was smaller, the essence was the same, the refusal to be confined by age, circumstance, or fear. At the senior center, Harold was greeted by a room filled with faces marked by time and stories untold. Some eyes held skepticism, others shimmered with curiosity. Harold began by sharing his own story, the moments of doubt, the turning points, the small choices that led to profound change. He spoke candidly about the struggles of aging, the losses, the loneliness, the creeping sense of invisibility, but also about the surprising strength that can emerge when we refuse to give up. His words resonated deeply. After his talk, a flood of questions and conversations unfolded. Many shared their own dreams deferred or fears of starting anew. Harold listened, offering encouragement and practical advice. The room buzzed with a renewed energy, a collective spark ignited by the possibility of reinvention. Over the following weeks, Harold worked closely with the center to launch a series of programs focused on creative exploration, skill building, and community connection. The response was overwhelming. Seniors who had long felt stuck began to explore new hobbies, start small businesses, and volunteer in ways they never imagined. Harold found himself at the heart of a movement, a network of people committed to rewriting the narrative of aging. One afternoon, as Harold walked through the community garden with Frank and Jasmine, he marveled at the changes blooming all around. The garden was more than plants, it was a symbol of growth and renewal, a living metaphor for the power of reinvention. Frank shared that he had started writing again, inspired by Harold's journey and the support of their community. Jasmine was preparing to launch her nonprofit with a team of passionate volunteers, energized by the intergenerational connections they had built. Harold felt a swell of pride and gratitude. Reinvention was not a solitary act but a shared journey, a tapestry woven with the threads of hope, courage, and connection. That evening, Harold sat at his workbench, sketching ideas for a new invention designed to assist seniors with mobility challenges. His mind buzzed with possibilities, fueled by the creative energy surrounding him. The work was challenging, but Harold embraced it with the enthusiasm of someone who had discovered a new purpose. As night fell, Harold reflected on how far he had come, from a man burdened by regret and fear to one actively shaping his future. He thought of the tunnels Elon Musk was building beneath cities, carving new pathways to connect and transform. Harold was doing the same, tunneling beneath the weight of age and doubt to uncover new possibilities. Reinvention was the engine driving him forward, and he knew that the journey would continue as long as he was willing to take the next step. In the quiet of the night, Harold whispered to himself a truth that had taken years to embrace: I am not too old to change. I am just getting started. The power of reinvention was real, and it was his to claim. Harold awoke to a morning wrapped in gray clouds, the kind that pressed heavily on the spirit as much as the sky. Despite the warmth of his cozy home and the vibrant community he had helped foster, a familiar companion had crept back into his life: doubt. It was the quiet, persistent voice whispering in the corners of his mind: is this really possible? Am I fooling myself? What if I fail again? The progress he'd made, the bridges rebuilt, the mentorship embraced, and the reinvention underway, all of it suddenly felt fragile, vulnerable to collapse. As he sat by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass, Harold acknowledged the fear without judgment. Doubt was part of the journey. It wasn't a sign of weakness but a natural human response to change and uncertainty. He remembered a quote from Elon Musk that Jasmine had once shared: some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is disaster. The words resonated deeply. Doubt was a storm, but stagnation was a far worse fate. That day, Harold faced a particularly daunting challenge: a presentation at the City Council advocating for expanded funding for the Intergenerational Innovation Lab. It was a critical moment, one that could determine the future of the project and the dreams tied to it. The stakes felt high, and the weight of responsibility pressed on him like never before. In the hours leading up to the presentation, Harold wrestled with his nerves. The self-doubt bubbled to the surface, threatening to undermine his confidence. He questioned whether his voice would carry enough weight, whether the council would see the value in what they were building. But then, in a moment of clarity, he remembered his own story: not just the victories but the struggles, the storms faced and overcome. This was not about perfection or guaranteed success. It was about persistence, passion, and the refusal to give up. At the council chambers, Harold stood before the room filled with officials, community leaders, and curious onlookers. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice rang clear and steady. He spoke of the power of connection, the transformative impact of the lab, and the potential to redefine aging in their city. He shared stories from the seniors and youth whose lives had been changed, weaving in the lessons of resilience and hope that had guided his own path. The council members listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging thoughtful glances. When the presentation ended, the room filled with questions, challenging but fair. Harold responded with honesty and conviction, drawing from his experience and the collective strength of the community behind him. Days later, the news came: the funding was approved. The victory was sweet but tempered by the knowledge that challenges would continue. Doubt might return, but Harold was learning to face it with courage rather than avoidance. Back at the Innovation Lab, the momentum surged forward. New projects launched, collaborations flourished, and the energy was electric. Yet Harold remained vigilant, reminding himself and others that growth required patience and resilience. One afternoon, as he worked alongside Jasmine and Frank, Harold shared his recent struggles with doubt. Jasmine nodded empathetically, sharing her own fears of failure and inadequacy. Frank added that doubt had been a constant companion in his life as well, but it had never stopped him from trying. Together, they formed a circle of support, a reminder that no one faced their journey alone. The challenge of doubt became a catalyst for deeper connection, honesty, and strength. Harold's story spread further, reaching seniors grappling with similar fears. His message was clear: doubt is not the enemy but a signpost on the road to growth. Embracing it, learning from it, and moving forward anyway was the true act of courage. As spring blossomed fully, Harold felt a renewed sense of purpose. The storms of doubt would come, but so would the moments of breakthrough, connection, and joy. Like Elon Musk breaking through barriers with relentless innovation, Harold was breaking through his own inner barriers, one step at a time. The journey was far from over, but Harold no longer feared the shadows. Instead, he saw them as part of the light. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, casting long golden beams across the worn wooden table where Harold sat, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The aroma filled the room, grounding him as his thoughts raced ahead to the decision looming large in his mind. A leap of faith, a phrase that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The Community Innovation Lab was thriving, the funding secured, and the projects multiplying, but now Harold faced a new challenge, an opportunity to scale the program to neighboring towns, reaching even more seniors and young people. The invitation came from a regional nonprofit that saw the potential in Harold's vision. They wanted him to lead a pilot program across several counties. It was a chance to expand the impact but also a risk. The demands would be greater, the travel more frequent, and the responsibility heavier. For a man his age, with the aches and limitations he'd come to accept, it felt like standing at the edge of a precipice. Could he do it? Was this the right move? Doubt whispered again, but this time Harold met it with a quiet strength. He recalled the journey that had brought him here, the late nights in the workshop, the mentorship with Jasmine, the storms faced and overcome. The spark ignited by Elon Musk's example, fearless, relentless, undeterred by obstacles, burned steadily inside him. He decided, he would take the leap. The first step was to meet with the nonprofit's leadership team. In a bright conference room filled with maps and charts, Harold shared his vision with passion and clarity. He spoke not only of logistics but of the deeper purpose. The potential to transform how communities valued and engaged their seniors, to build bridges across generations, and to ignite hope where it had dimmed. The leaders were impressed by his conviction and the success of the pilot lab. They agreed to move forward, and plans were set in motion. Over the next weeks, Harold threw himself into preparations. He coordinated with local organizations, recruited volunteers, and refined program curricula. The work was intense and exhausting, but Harold felt alive in a way he hadn't in decades. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Harold sat on his porch, the cool breeze brushing his face. Lisa joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea. She sat quietly beside him, sensing the storm of emotions beneath his calm exterior. "Are you scared?" she asked gently. Harold smiled, the lines on his face softening. "A little," he admitted. "But I've learned that fear doesn't have to stop us. It can be a signal, a reminder that what we're about to do matters." Lisa nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "You've come so far, Dad. This leap, it's just the next chapter." With her support and the strength of his community behind him, Harold felt ready. The pilot program launched with a modest ceremony in a neighboring town's community center. The room was filled with seniors curious about the new opportunities and young people eager to learn and connect. Harold's speech was heartfelt and inspiring, a call to action and hope. The first workshops focused on storytelling, technology, and collaborative projects that paired seniors with youth to solve local challenges. The energy was electric, the barriers between generations melting away in the shared pursuit of purpose. Yet, as the program grew, challenges emerged. Logistics became complex, travel tiring, and coordinating multiple sites a juggling act. Harold felt the strain physically and emotionally. There were moments when the weight of responsibility pressed down hard. But each time doubt threatened, Harold returned to his core belief, that transformation was worth the struggle. He leaned on his support network, Lisa, Jasmine, Frank, and the volunteers who had become like family. They reminded him that he was not alone and that even small steps forward were progress. One afternoon, during a visit to one of the pilot sites, Harold witnessed a breakthrough that made it all worthwhile. An elderly woman named Margaret, who had been hesitant to join, stood proudly before the group, sharing a digital photo album she had created with her grandchildren. Her voice trembled with emotion as she spoke of reconnecting with family and rediscovering joy. The room erupted in applause, and Harold felt tears prick his eyes. This was the ripple effect he had dreamed of, the power of reinvention, connection, and hope extending beyond his own life. The pilot program continued to grow, gaining attention from local media and community leaders. Harold's story, once marked by doubt and fear, was now one of bold action and impact. The leap of faith had become a powerful flight. As the sun set on another busy day, Harold sat quietly in his workshop, surrounded by sketches and prototypes. He reflected on the journey, the moments of uncertainty, the victories, and the unyielding determination that had carried him here. Like Elon Musk tunneling beneath cities to build new futures, Harold was tunneling beneath his own limitations, creating pathways for himself and others. The road ahead was still long and filled with unknowns, but Harold was ready. He whispered to himself with quiet confidence, "This is just the beginning." The community center buzzed with energy as Harold stepped inside, greeted by a chorus of laughter, chatter, and the shuffling of feet. It was a Saturday morning like no other. Today was the launch of the first-ever intergenerational summit, a gathering Harold had dreamed of for months. Seniors and young people from across the region had come together to share stories, ideas, and dreams, breaking down walls that too often separated age groups. The room was filled with a vibrant mosaic of faces, wrinkled hands clasping eager youth, eyes sparkling with curiosity, and hearts open to connection. Harold's chest swelled with pride and hope. This was the living proof of transformation, the embodiment of reinvention not just for himself but for the community. He remembered the early days when he felt invisible, dismissed, and weighed down by regret. Now, he was at the center of a movement that was reshaping perceptions of aging and possibility. The summit kicked off with a keynote speech from Harold, who spoke passionately about the power of bridges, between past and future, experience and innovation, wisdom and curiosity. He shared stories of how collaboration had sparked creativity, empathy, and growth for everyone involved. Afterward, workshops filled the day, led by seniors and youth working side by side. They tackled projects ranging from environmental initiatives to digital storytelling, each one weaving together the strengths of different generations. Harold wandered through the rooms, watching as participants laughed, learned, and created together. One group was building a community garden, planting seeds that symbolized hope and renewal. Another was recording oral histories, preserving memories that might have been lost without these new connections. Harold's heart felt full. Later, during a panel discussion, Jasmine shared her journey, a young woman inspired and mentored by Harold's unwavering belief in second chances and bold dreams. She spoke of how the program had given her purpose and direction when she had felt lost. The audience responded with applause, the energy palpable. But the summit wasn't without its challenges. Some participants struggled to let go of stereotypes and past grievances. There were moments of tension, misunderstanding, and frustration. Harold witnessed these moments as opportunities, chances to model patience, empathy, and the hard work of building bridges. He reminded everyone that transformation was messy and imperfect but deeply worthwhile. As the day drew to a close, Harold led a closing circle, inviting everyone to share their reflections and hopes. Voices spoke of newfound friendships, inspirations, and a shared commitment to continue the work beyond the summit. Harold listened, feeling the power of community weaving itself stronger. When the last attendee left, Harold stayed behind to tidy up. Alone in the quiet room, he thought of Elon Musk's relentless drive to innovate and connect. Like the tunnels beneath cities linking disparate places, Harold was helping build tunnels between generations, pathways of understanding, respect, and collaboration. That night, Harold sat by his fireplace, the flickering flames echoing the fire in his heart. He knew the journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, setbacks, and doubts. But there would also be breakthroughs, joy, and the enduring power of connection. As he looked ahead, Harold felt a deep sense of purpose and possibility. The bridges he and his community were building weren't just for today but for the generations to come. They were creating a legacy, not of fear or limitation, but of hope and transformation. In the quiet of the night, Harold whispered to himself, "Together, we are unstoppable." Harold sat on the worn bench in the park near his home, the autumn leaves swirling gently at his feet like fragments of time. The crisp air carried the scent of earth and change, a reminder that life itself was a cycle of seasons, some vibrant, some fading, but all part of the whole. He watched a group of children playing nearby, their laughter ringing through the air, innocent and full of promise. It struck him how fleeting moments like these were, and how deeply the concept of legacy had come to weigh on his heart. What would he leave behind? Not just in terms of projects or programs, but in meaning, in memory, in the mark on the world that said, "I was here. I mattered." For decades, Harold had wrestled with the feeling of invisibility, that slow fading into the background as years piled on. Yet now, through his work with the intergenerational community and the ripples of reinvention, he sensed that legacy wasn't a distant monument but something lived every day. The legacy was in the smiles rekindled, the dreams reignited, the hands held across generations. Yet, as powerful as these moments were, Harold felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. Could he do enough? Would his efforts last beyond his lifetime? Would the bridges he built withstand the test of time? These questions were heavy, but they also fueled his determination. He thought of Elon Musk, whose vision stretched far beyond the present, a man building rockets to reach Mars, driven by a desire to secure humanity's future. That same spirit of boldness and foresight inspired Harold to think bigger. That afternoon, Harold met with Lisa and Jasmine in the sunlit kitchen. The conversation turned to legacy, and the weight and wonder it carried. Lisa, ever practical and warm, reminded Harold that legacy was not just what we leave behind but what we nurture in others, the values, the courage, the hope. Jasmine, vibrant with youthful idealism, shared her vision of carrying forward the torch, of expanding their work to new communities, new causes. Together, they dreamed aloud, sketching plans that blended experience with innovation. Harold felt a surge of hope. Legacy was alive in this passing of the flame, in the collaboration of generations committed to change. Over the following weeks, Harold worked on documenting the story of their community's transformation. He wrote with honesty, capturing both triumphs and struggles, ensuring the journey was recorded for future generations to learn from and build upon. The project became a labor of love, a bridge between past and future. One evening, as Harold reviewed his draft, Lisa brought in a letter from a local high school principal. It was an invitation for Harold to speak to students about resilience, reinvention, and legacy. The request filled him with nervous excitement. Standing before the students days later, Harold felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but he grounded himself in the purpose that had carried him this far. He shared his story candidly, his fears, failures, and the unexpected paths that led to new beginnings. The students listened, rapt and engaged, their eyes bright with possibility. Afterward, many approached him, eager to share their own dreams and struggles. Harold realized that legacy wasn't a heavy burden but a shared journey, a conversation that crossed time and age. The seeds planted in that auditorium were new roots for the future. As the season turned deeper into autumn, Harold continued to nurture the community and his own creative projects. He found comfort in routine but remained open to the unexpected, knowing that transformation often came from the places we least expect. One evening, as he sat by the fireplace with Lisa, he reflected on the paradox of legacy, that it was both an ending and a beginning, a culmination of a life lived and the start of new stories. He whispered softly, "Maybe legacy isn't about what I leave behind, but what I help to grow." The warmth of the fire mirrored the warmth in his heart, a steady flame fueled by purpose, connection, and hope. The weight of legacy was heavy, but Harold carried it with grace and gratitude. Like the tunnels Elon Musk envisioned beneath the earth, hidden but vital. Harold's legacy was quietly shaping the future, one connection at a time. Harold felt it before he saw it, the sudden shift in the air, a quiet tension rippling through the Community Innovation Lab as if an unseen storm was gathering on the horizon. The lab, once buzzing with excitement and progress, had started to feel different. Meetings became more strained, volunteers less enthusiastic, and a shadow of doubt crept into conversations. Harold knew this feeling well. It was the moment of reckoning, that inevitable test when the hardest choices must be made. The lab was facing budget cuts. The nonprofit that had funded their pilot program was struggling, and Harold's vision for expansion was under threat. The news hit like a cold wave, stirring up fears he had long battled, the fear of failure, of losing what they had built, of letting down the community that had come to depend on this new source of hope. In the quiet of his workshop that evening, Harold stared at the sketches and plans pinned to the wall, the tangible dreams they were at risk of losing. The weight was crushing. But somewhere deep inside, a flicker of Musk-inspired resolve ignited. Failure was not final unless you gave up. Harold recalled Musk's relentless pursuit of his goals, often facing public doubt and near collapse. The lesson was clear: crisis could be a crucible for transformation, if met with courage and creativity. The next day, Harold convened an emergency meeting with his closest allies, Lisa, Jasmine, Frank, and a handful of dedicated volunteers. The mood was somber, but Harold spoke with unwavering clarity. "We can't control everything," he began, "but we can control how we respond. This is our moment to get creative, to rally our community, and to fight for what we believe in." Ideas flowed: fundraising events, grant applications, partnerships with local businesses, even a crowdfunding campaign. The team embraced the challenge with determination, channeling fear into action. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Harold found himself stretched thin, juggling negotiations, outreach, and hands-on work. The physical toll was real, the aches, the fatigue, but the fire inside him burned brighter. Every "no" they encountered became fuel for persistence. Along the way, Harold discovered surprising allies: former skeptics who stepped forward to support the cause, neighbors who volunteered time and resources, and young people inspired to take leadership roles. The community was rallying, united by the shared vision Harold had nurtured. One chilly evening, Harold stood before a crowd gathered for a fundraising gala held in the town hall. The room was filled with warmth, hope, and a palpable sense of purpose. Harold spoke from the heart, sharing the journey, the stakes, and the dreams at risk. His voice wavered with emotion, but he carried the crowd with him. After his speech, donations poured in, and volunteers signed up for new initiatives. It was a turning point, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. Yet challenges persisted. Bureaucratic hurdles, exhaustion, and the constant pressure threatened to overwhelm. Harold had to remind himself to pause, breathe, and lean on his support network. Lisa's steady presence, Jasmine's boundless energy, and Frank's wisdom became lifelines. Late one night, after a particularly grueling day, Harold found himself alone in the innovation lab. He walked through the empty rooms, the silence echoing his doubts and fears. But then, in the quiet, he found clarity. The journey wasn't about avoiding hardship but embracing it as part of growth. He whispered to himself, "This is what it means to live fully, to risk, to struggle, and to rise." The crisis forged a deeper resilience within Harold and his community. They adapted, evolved, and found new ways to thrive. The lab emerged stronger, more connected, and more determined than ever. Through the storm, Harold realized that the moment of reckoning was not an end but a powerful catalyst for transformation, a reminder that true change required not just vision but relentless courage and heart. As he prepared for bed that night, Harold looked out the window at the stars scattered across the sky. He felt a profound connection to the vastness of possibility, the unknown frontiers yet to explore. Like Elon Musk reaching for the stars, Harold understood that reaching beyond fear was the essence of living. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but he faced it with a renewed spirit, ready to meet whatever came with open arms. The hum of voices, the tapping of keyboards, the swirl of ideas in the Community Innovation Lab felt electric that morning. What had once been a small pilot project had transformed into something bigger than Harold ever imagined, a movement that was now spreading beyond the borders of their town. News outlets had picked up on their work, social media buzzed with stories of seniors and youth working side by side to rebuild not just their lives but their communities. Harold felt a surge of pride mixed with humility. The journey had been anything but easy, yet here they were, proof that reinvention was possible at any age, that purpose and passion did not fade with the years but could blaze brighter than ever. The movement began to take shape one story at a time. Margaret, who once hesitated to join the workshops, was now a local celebrity for her digital storytelling project, inspiring others to reconnect with family and history. Jasmine had grown into a leader, mentoring others and expanding the program's reach. Even Frank, initially skeptical, had become a fierce advocate, sharing his experience with audiences across the region. Harold watched all this with a quiet sense of awe. It was no longer just about his own transformation, it was about the collective power of a community rising together. The lab became a hub of creativity and connection, a place where age was not a barrier but a bridge. One afternoon, as Harold worked on plans for the next phase of the program, his phone buzzed with a message that made his heart skip. It was an invitation to speak at a national conference on aging and innovation, a chance to share their story with leaders and changemakers from across the country. The weight of the opportunity settled on him, mingled with nerves and excitement. He knew this was a moment to amplify their message, to shine a light on the possibilities of aging boldly. Preparation consumed the next days. Harold practiced his speech, weaving in the highs and lows, the fears and triumphs, and the enduring lesson that transformation was always within reach. The day of the conference arrived, and Harold stood before an auditorium filled with faces hungry for inspiration. As he spoke, he felt a powerful connection, a shared yearning for change and meaning. His story resonated deeply, sparking conversations and new partnerships. Back home, the ripple effect was tangible. New communities reached out, eager to start similar programs. Funding flowed in from unexpected sources. The movement was no longer confined, it was spreading like wildfire, fueled by hope and courage. Yet Harold never lost sight of the individual moments that made the movement real, the laughter shared over a garden bed, the tears shed in storytelling circles, the handshakes sealing new friendships. These were the threads weaving a tapestry of resilience and renewal. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Harold stood outside the lab, watching a group of seniors and youth planting trees in a new community park. The sight filled him with a profound sense of purpose and peace. They were building more than gardens, they were cultivating futures. As the stars emerged, Harold thought about the journey from that lonely kitchen table to this vibrant, thriving movement. He thought about Elon Musk, the man who dared to dream beyond the impossible, and how that spirit had lit a fire within him. The spark that had once seemed so fragile now burned strong and wide. Harold knew there would be challenges ahead, but he faced them with confidence, surrounded by a community bound by hope and determination. In that moment, he whispered a quiet promise to himself and to the generations who would follow: this is just the beginning. Harold sat alone in the quiet of his living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The hum of activity at the Community Innovation Lab felt distant now, a heartbeat he carried within him. Tonight, he was reflecting on how far the journey had taken him and the remarkable truth that had become clearer with every step: the power of one person to spark change. It wasn't the grand gestures alone that shifted the world, often, it was the small, courageous acts of a single individual willing to step forward despite doubt and fear. Harold thought back to the moment when he first encountered Elon Musk's ideas, the way Musk's relentless drive to challenge limits had ignited a spark inside him. That spark had grown into a flame, fueled by determination, resilience, and the unwavering belief that reinvention was possible no matter the age. The power of one choice, one action, one voice, had transformed Harold's life and rippled outward, touching countless others. In the quiet stillness, Harold pulled out a worn notebook filled with notes, sketches, and letters from community members. Each page told a story of transformation, of individuals reclaiming purpose and passion, breaking free from the invisible chains of invisibility and doubt. There was Margaret's story, how she had found her voice through digital storytelling and reconnected with her estranged granddaughter. Jasmine's journey, from lost teenager to community leader, inspired by the mentorship she found. Frank's reluctant but powerful embrace of change, becoming a beacon for others skeptical of new paths. Harold smiled softly, grateful for each story, each life touched. The movement was made up of many ones, each powerful in its own right. Yet Harold also understood that the power of one was amplified through connection. It was the willingness to listen, to reach across divides, to build bridges that multiplied impact. The intergenerational summit, the community gardens, the storytelling workshops, all were proof that when individuals come together, their combined strength creates something far greater than the sum of its parts. Inspired by this realization, Harold began planning a new initiative, a mentorship program pairing seniors with young people from underserved communities. The goal was simple yet profound: to pass on wisdom, nurture dreams, and build bonds that would endure beyond programs and projects. The idea was met with enthusiasm from Lisa, Jasmine, and the wider community. Together, they started recruiting mentors and ments, creating spaces for connection, learning, and growth. As the program launched, Harold observed the subtle yet powerful changes taking place. Seniors found renewed purpose in guiding and supporting young lives, while youth gained confidence, hope, and a sense of belonging. These relationships blossomed into friendships that defied age and circumstance, weaving a tapestry of resilience and renewal. One afternoon, Harold received a letter that stirred something deep inside, a note from a young man named Carlos, one of the ments. Carlos wrote about his struggles with school and family, how he had felt lost and invisible, until Harold's mentorship program showed him he mattered. He spoke of newfound dreams, a desire to give back, and gratitude for being seen and heard. Harold's eyes moistened as he read the words. This was the power of one, the ripple effect of kindness and belief. Later that week, Harold attended a community gathering where mentors and ments shared their stories. The room was alive with energy, laughter, and tears, testimonies of courage and connection. Harold realized that his journey was not just his own but part of a larger movement towards belonging and purpose. He thought of Elon Musk again, not just as a symbol of innovation but as a reminder that courage to challenge norms and embrace risk could unlock extraordinary potential in everyone. As the night wore on, Harold found a quiet moment outside, gazing up at the stars. The vast sky stretched endlessly, a canvas of possibility and mystery. He felt deeply connected, to the people he served, to the legacy he was building, and to the infinite potential within every human heart. The power of one was real. It was alive in him, in the community, and in the quiet courage of anyone willing to believe in change. Harold whispered into the night, "I am one, and that is enough to make a difference." And with that, he felt a profound peace, knowing that the journey of transformation was ongoing, fueled by the power of one and the strength of many. The morning sun filtered softly through the lace curtains, casting a warm glow over Harold's study. The room was filled with quiet reminders of a life transformed, a collage of photographs, notes, and mementos chronicling the journey from isolation to community, from doubt to purpose. Harold sat at his desk, a cup of coffee steaming gently beside him, and reflected on the road he had traveled. It was hard to believe how much had changed since that lonely evening years ago when fear and regret threatened to define him. Now, he felt alive in a way he never had before, not because he had escaped the weight of aging, but because he had embraced it, discovering strength and meaning in the process. The intergenerational community, the mentorship programs, the gardens, the stories, they were all threads woven into a vibrant tapestry of hope. Harold's heart swelled with gratitude for every person who had joined him on this path. As he prepared to leave for a celebration honoring the movement they had built, Harold paused to write a letter. A letter not just to the people he had touched, but to anyone feeling lost, forgotten, or too old to change. He wrote with raw honesty, sharing his struggles and triumphs, the doubts that once held him captive, and the courage that had finally set him free. "I was never too old," he wrote, "I was just waiting for permission to matter again." The words felt like a key unlocking something deep inside, a truth he hoped others would carry forward. At the celebration, the community center overflowed with faces familiar and new. Friends, family, volunteers, and supporters gathered to honor the collective journey. Speeches were made, songs were sung, and stories were shared, each a testament to the power of reinvention and connection. Harold took the stage, feeling a mixture of humility and pride. As he spoke, he looked out at the crowd and saw not just people but a living legacy, a movement alive and growing. He shared the lessons learned. That age was not a limit but a lens through which to see opportunity, that courage and vulnerability were twin engines of transformation, and that purpose could be found in the most unexpected places. "We are all architects of our futures," he said, voice steady and clear. "No matter the years behind us, there are new beginnings waiting to unfold." The applause was thunderous, but Harold's eyes sought out Jasmine and Lisa, their smiles reflecting the journey's heart. Later, as the evening wound down, Harold stepped outside under the starlit sky. The air was cool, carrying the scent of earth and possibility. He thought of Elon Musk, not just as a figure of innovation and daring but as a symbol of the fearless spirit that had sparked his own rebirth. The tunnels beneath the city, the rockets aiming for Mars, the electric cars racing toward a cleaner future, all reminders that age and circumstance need not define the limits of what is possible. Harold's phone buzzed with a message from Jasmine, ready for the next adventure. He smiled and typed back, "Always." The new beginning was not an end but a continuing story, one of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of human connection. Harold knew the road ahead would have challenges, but he faced it with a heart wide open, fueled by the lessons of the past and the promise of tomorrow. As he walked back inside, he whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning. And it's never too late." The fire inside him burned steady, a beacon for all who dared to dream beyond their years. The legacy was living, breathing, and unstoppable. It was a Tuesday morning like any other, cloudless sky, the rustle of leaves outside the window, and the familiar creak of Harold's old floorboards as he shuffled into the kitchen. He poured his coffee, added exactly 1 sugar cube, and stood there in his robe, staring out the window at the small community garden that had once been a forgotten patch of dirt. Now it bloomed with color, laughter, and life. It was the kind of ordinary morning that had become his new rhythm, yet there was nothing ordinary about the letter waiting in his mailbox. Harold found it an hour later, tucked between utility bills and a flyer for a new hardware store. A stark white envelope, no return address, but the emblem in the corner caught his eye, a thin silver X. It looked vaguely familiar. He stared at it for a second, brow furrowed. Then it hit him, X.com. Elon Musk's personal venture. His heart stuttered in his chest. He brought it inside with careful hands, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened it like he was disarming a bomb. The letter inside was crisp, typed, signed in bold black ink. Harold. A story crossed my desk recently. A story about a man in his 70s who transformed his town, who turned a spark of curiosity into a wave of purpose. I had to reach out. You reminded me of something I say often, but rarely get to witness so clearly, that life's greatest risks are often not taken because of fear, not failure. But you took the risk. You broke the script. That takes more than guts. That takes belief. Too many people believe innovation belongs to the young. But you proved it doesn't. It belongs to the bold. Keep building. Keep believing. You're not just changing your life, you're changing what people believe is possible. Elon. Harold sat frozen, the letter trembling in his hands. It was like being seen by the man who had unknowingly ignited his entire transformation. Elon Musk, billionaire, disruptor, risk-taker, had read about him. Had taken the time to write him. Harold read it 3 more times, each word settling deeper into his soul. It wasn't about the fame or the recognition. It was about the validation, that this late-in-life journey wasn't just personal. It was universal. For a long time, he just sat there, coffee forgotten, the letter resting in his lap like a sacred relic. Then, slowly, he reached for his phone and called Lisa. "Dad," she answered. "You sound weird. Everything okay?" "I got a letter," Harold said, voice cracking. "From who?" "Elon Musk." Silence. "You mean the Elon Musk?" she asked, half laughing. "Yes," Harold said. And he said I reminded him of himself. That afternoon, word spread. Jasmine showed up at his door within the hour. You have to post it, she said breathlessly. This will inspire so many people, Harold. It's bigger than just you now. Harold was reluctant at first. He never wanted to be the face of anything. He was just an old man who refused to disappear. But Jasmine was right. This was no longer about his journey, it was about everyone who thought their time had passed. Everyone who believed they were too old, too broken, too forgotten. And so, they posted the letter on the Community Labs blog, along with a photo of Harold holding it, tears shining in his eyes. The response was explosive. Within 24 hours, national media outlets picked it up. The blog was flooded with comments from seniors across the country. I haven't felt this alive in years. I signed up for a coding class today. I started writing the book I shelved 20 years ago. Thank you for reminding me I'm not done yet. Harold was overwhelmed. He didn't want to be a hero. But maybe that was the point. Maybe people didn't need perfect heroes. Maybe they just needed proof that one person could make a comeback. That the second act could be even more powerful than the first. Over the next weeks, Harold was invited to speak on podcasts, panels, and even appeared on a national morning show via video call. But more than the attention, what struck him were the letters, hundreds of them. From people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s. A man in Kansas who built a solar-powered greenhouse in his backyard. A woman in Vermont who used her savings to open a sewing co-op for local teenage girls. A retired trucker in Texas who started painting for the first time since he was 12. They weren't just inspired by Harold. They were acting. Risking. Reinvention was catching fire. One morning, a handwritten letter arrived from a woman named Ethel in Arizona. She was 91, recently widowed, and had been living alone in silence until she read Harold's story. She wrote, I thought my life had shrunk to the size of this apartment. But after reading about you, I decided to start again. I joined a local art group. I laughed yesterday. I hadn't laughed in months. Thank you. Harold cried reading it. He wasn't ashamed. One person. One spark. That's all it took. But then came a new kind of pressure, the kind that sneaks in when hope gets too big. Expectations grew. People wanted more programs, more ideas, more Harold. But he was tired. His knees ached, his back twinged. He wasn't a machine. He was a man. And one afternoon, after back-to-back meetings with donors and a long video call with a tech company interested in funding their next expansion, he finally said it out loud to Lisa. I need to rest. She looked at him with the compassion only a daughter could hold. Then rest, she said. You don't have to carry this forever, Dad. You started it. That's enough. The words were like water. Healing. Permission. Harold took a few weeks away. He spent mornings in the garden, afternoons at the lake. He wrote, not for the blog or the press, but just for himself. He found that silence was sacred. That impact didn't have to be loud to be lasting. And slowly, he started to see the truth, what he built didn't need to be driven by him forever. It had a life now. Others had picked up the torch. Jasmine was leading the mentorship program now. Frank was running workshops. Lisa had begun hosting monthly panels to bring in new voices. The movement was no longer Harold's. It was everyone's. And that, he realized, was the legacy. Not just doing something great, but creating something that outlasted you. On his last day of rest, Harold sat on his back porch and reread Elon's letter. Then he picked up a pen and wrote back. Elon. I never thought I'd write these words, but thank you. Not for the letter, though that meant more than I can say, but for the way you challenged the world. For giving permission, by your example, to question the rules. I took that permission and ran with it. Turns out, when you dig deep enough, under fear, under regret, you find something still alive. I found mine. Now others are finding theirs. We aren't done. Not at 60. Not at 70. Not at 91. Thanks for lighting the match. We'll keep the fire going. Harold. He folded it, not knowing if he'd actually send it. Maybe it wasn't about Elon anymore. Maybe it never was. Maybe the journey had always been about proving to himself, and others, that there's no such thing as too late. Because there isn't. The day began quietly, just the way Harold liked it. A late autumn breeze danced through the trees, rustling the amber and gold leaves in his yard. The town felt slower now, as if it, too, was taking a deep breath after all that had happened. Harold, dressed in his favorite cardigan and worn-in walking shoes, stood on the porch of the Community Innovation Lab, the building that had once been a forgotten post office and was now a beating heart of reinvention. Today, something different was happening. They were unveiling the plaque. It wasn't about Harold, not entirely. The plaque would bear the names of dozens of people, young and old, who had contributed to the movement that changed the town. But there was one name, carved into the bottom corner, that made Harold's throat tighten, inspired by Harold Briggs, who proved it's never too late to begin again. He had protested, of course. Said it should be anonymous. Said it wasn't about him. But Jasmine had smiled and said, "Harold, it's not about ego. It's about truth. You gave us permission to believe again." As people began to gather, Harold walked slowly along the gravel path leading toward the ceremony. He passed the garden beds, now dormant for the season, but still fragrant with the promise of spring. He passed the storytelling wall, a large wooden structure where people had pinned handwritten stories of change, love, loss, and rebirth. And he passed the young boy named Micah, age 10, who had started volunteering at the lab after school. Micah waved. "Hi, Mr. Briggs. My grandma told me you're like the Elon Musk of our town." Harold chuckled and waved back. "Well, tell your grandma I take that as a compliment." When he reached the ceremony site, Harold saw Lisa, standing tall and calm beside the microphone. Jasmine adjusted the sound system, beaming with the energy of someone who had stepped into her purpose fully. Frank was there, wearing a blazer for the first time in years, shaking hands and telling jokes. And the crowd, oh, the crowd. At least 200 people. Seniors in walkers and wheelchairs. Teens with notepads and cameras. Parents holding babies. People of every shape, background, and age. All drawn by something that had once started as a whisper in one old man's heart. Lisa stepped up to the mic. "We're here today not just to celebrate a building or a program," she began, "but a shift in mindset. A declaration that we are never finished. That no matter how many years have passed, or what we've lost along the way, we are still capable of growth, joy, and contribution." The crowd murmured in agreement, some clapping softly. "And there's someone here," she continued, "who embodies that truth. He didn't ask for the spotlight. He didn't set out to start a movement. But through one small choice, one walk, one idea, one conversation, he created a ripple that turned into a wave. Dad, will you come up here?" Harold didn't move at first. He stared at the podium, stunned. He had known they'd say something, but this? He took a breath, stepped forward, and the crowd parted like a river around him. A few people clapped, others placed a hand on his shoulder as he passed. When he reached the mic, he looked out at them all and blinked against the sunlight. "I don't like speeches," he began, "and I don't like being fussed over. Laughter. But I do like telling the truth. And the truth is, for a long time, I thought my life had shrunk. I thought the best parts were behind me. I thought I had nothing left to offer." He paused. "And then I watched a video clip, just a short one. Elon Musk was talking about digging tunnels under Los Angeles to beat traffic. Everyone was laughing at him. They thought he was out of his mind. But he said, why not? Traffic is soul-crushing. And then he built the tunnel anyway. A few people nodded. That stuck with me. Not because of the technology, but because of the mindset. Because here's this guy, worth billions, changing the world, and he still gets told, you can't, or, you're crazy. And he just ignores it. Harold looked down at the front row where Jasmine sat, tears brimming in her eyes. I was 73 when I saw that video. Alone. Angry. Full of regrets. But something in me lit up. And I said, why not me? Why not now? I didn't build a tunnel under the city. But I did dig out from under the fear that told me I was too old to try. He paused again, his voice catching. This place, this community, this movement, we built it together. And if you're sitting here today wondering if you're too late, too tired, too far gone, I want to tell you something, you're not. The tunnel isn't the end. It's how you get to the light on the other side. Silence fell over the crowd, deep and sacred. Then applause. Not polite clapping, but full, emotional thunder. People rose to their feet. Some cried. Others hugged. In that moment, Harold didn't feel old. He didn't feel like a relic or a retired man. He felt like a lighthouse, weathered, yes, but still standing, still shining. After the ceremony, Harold walked the long path back home alone. He needed the quiet. The air was crisp, the sky a soft watercolor of pink and orange. His steps were slow but steady. When he reached his porch, he sat down in his rocking chair and opened his notebook, his final one, the one he'd been saving for, after. He wrote. Chapter 1, the day I stopped waiting for permission. I didn't know what would come next. I just knew I couldn't stay still any longer. And somehow, that was enough. Hours passed. The sun dipped low. A car pulled into the driveway. Jasmine stepped out, carrying a small box. I found this in the lab, she said, handing it to him. Harold opened it. Inside was a framed photo, Elon Musk at one of his SpaceX launches, staring up at the sky. Below it was a quote, some people build rockets. Others build people. Beneath that, Jasmine had written in her loopy handwriting, you did both. He smiled, then laughed, the sound full and warm. Later that night, as stars dusted the sky, Harold sat beneath them, the framed photo beside him, and watched the world turn. He no longer feared what tomorrow would bring. Because now he knew. It's never too late.